Jeremy Corbyn, 251,000.
Poverty isn't inevitable. Things can and they will change.
Dementia tax, gone. Millions losing their winter fuel allowance, gone. Fox hunting ban, gone.
In a YouGov poll of this morning, the Conservatives on 48% of the vote, Labour on half that.
We, the media, the pundits, the experts, know nothing.
The biggest campaign growth since polling began.
And in that election, we will commit to unleash the biggest people-powered campaign we've ever seen in this country and in this movement.
I ain't gon' fire on, catch a fade you, I'm wrong, I'm gone. Y'all can catch the wave that I am on, I am icon. Y'all are wide wrong, think that I'm a reconcile born, so ain't nothing to it though. This is on me, ain't got much to do with who you know. Keeping it true to from 10 L's into a milli though, but they already knew that those farewell to your opinions, know that he is.
We achieve all of these things by being a party and a movement totally and absolutely united to our common cause and purpose.
I'ma show you who I am unbreakable. I don't think you understand. Watch me escape it. I'ma show you who I am.
Hello everybody, my name is Sophia Khan and it's a great honour today to be able to address fellow Labour Party supporters and Brummies. There was a picture of me which went viral a couple of years back, which actually coincided with the last general election, and it made me feel very proud to be a Brummie and very proud to be able to stand side by side with lots of people actually that are here in the audience today in our fight against anti-racism. And again, I've been dealt with the very great honour of introducing at a public appearance of Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party. And it is something that's very close to my heart, something I support dearly, and I look at the promises in the new manifesto, and they fill me with a lot of hope. The continued and improved existence of the NHS fills me with a lot of hope as a concept. The support of schools and the sort of slow eradication of things like racism through various policies is something that's very close to my heart. Very proud to be a Bummie. And I'd like to introduce Becca Long-Bailey now, the Shadow Business Secretary.
Thank you. Well, welcome to everyone here in Birmingham. It's an absolute honour to speak at such an important moment in our election campaign, the launch of our radical, exciting, transformational manifesto. And it's fitting that we're here today in this great city to launch Labour's manifesto. Birmingham, like Salford, where I'm from, was the engine room of Britain's first industrial revolution. Matthew Boulton and James Watt's steam engine freed manufacturing from slow handwork and tired animals and unleashed productivity in factories across the world. This innovation ushered in a new era of industry and transport. It also brought about significant social changes. The creation of the Labour Party being one of them, as workers began to organise for better conditions. It is here in Birmingham today that we remember this proud history of innovation and hope as Labour sets out its vision for a green industrial revolution. We stand at the brink of unstoppable change. We must confront the climate environment emergency whilst dealing with growing inequality and insecurity right across Britain. But the Tories sat by as industries were packed up and shipped overseas. They wasted a decade serving the interests of big polluters. The Tories and their billionaire friends planned for their own futures at the expense of ours. And now Labour is on your side, and the future is ours to make. And we won't leave our fate up to market forces. Instead, we are going to use the might of government to support our people, our industries, and our businesses. Just as the first industrial revolution brought industry jobs and pride to our towns, Labour's green industrial revolution will rebuild them with whole new industries to revive parts of our country that have been neglected for too long. And these new industries will bring with them rewarding, well-paid jobs. Take the West Midlands, where we gather today. This region is home to one of the UK's biggest success stories, the automotive sector. A sector under siege from the Tories' lack of ambition on electrification. Unless we act, other countries will lead the way on manufacturing the vehicles of tomorrow, while our factories and our workers are left high and dry. Labour's green industrial revolution will invest £14 billion to accelerate the electrification process, creating and safeguarding 220,000 jobs. At the same time, the move to electric cars will slash our emissions, tackling the causes of climate and environment emergency head-on. And this is what real change looks like. And that's just the start, because there's a lot more where that came from in our manifesto. And we've got the perfect person here to tell you all about it. So without further ado, I would like to introduce someone you can really trust to make real change happen, because he's got a track record of standing strong over decades, of never being swayed from his principles, someone who, with a little help from his friends, has already transformed politics in this country, and that's before he's even in Downing Street. Friends, please welcome our next Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn. All right, Libby.
Thank you. Thank you, all the students from this wonderful university coming here to help us launch our manifesto today. And big thanks to Birmingham City University for hosting us for this wonderful building for the launch of our manifesto. Thank you so much to all of you. Labour's manifesto is a manifesto for hope. That is what this document is. A manifesto that will bring real change. A manifesto that's full of popular policies that the political establishment has blocked for a generation. But you can't have it. At least that's what the most powerful people in Britain and their supporters want you to believe. Over the next 3 weeks, they're going to tell you that everything in this manifesto is impossible, that it's too much for you, because they do not want real change in this country. Why would they? The system is working just fine for them. It's rigged in their favour. But it's not working for you. If your wages never seem to go up and your bills never seem to go down, if your public services only seem to get worse, despite the heroic efforts of those who work in them, then it's not working for you. And that's why so many people in Britain have given up on politics. That's why you hear people say about politicians, they're all the same. Well, not anymore. Because this party, this movement, this manifesto is different. Labour is on your side, and there could be scarcely a clearer demonstration of that than the furious reaction of the richest and most powerful. If the bankers, billionaires and the establishment thought we represented politics as usual, then we could be bought off that nothing was really going to change. They wouldn't attack us so ferociously. Why bother? But they know we mean what we say. They know we will deliver our plans, which is why they want to stop us being elected. They know we will go after the tax dodgers, the bad bosses, the big polluters, so that everybody in our country gets a fair chance in life. That's why they throw everything they've got at us, because they're scared of real change, because they aren't on your side. 1/3 of Britain's billionaires have donated to the Conservative Party. The billionaires and the super rich, the tax dodgers, the bad bosses and the big polluters, they own the Conservative Party, but they don't own us. They don't own the Labour Party. The people own the Labour Party, and I'm proud of that. That's why the billionaires attack us. That's why the billionaire-owned media makes things up about us. The US president who led his country out of the Great Depression, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, had to take on the rich and powerful in America to do it. That's why he said, "They are unanimous in their hate of me, and I welcome their hatred." He knew that when you're serious about real change, those who profit from a rigged system, those who squirrel away the wealth created by millions of people, won't give up without a fight. So I accept that the opposition and hostility of the rich and powerful is inevitable. I accept the opposition of the billionaires, because we will make those at the top pay their fair share of tax to help fund the world-class public services for you. That's real change. I accept the hostility of the bad bosses paying poverty pay, because we will give Britain a pay rise, starting with a real living wage of at least £10 an hour, including for young workers. That's real change. I accept the implacable opposition of the dodgy landlords, because we will build 1 million homes, empower tenants and control rents. That is real change. I accept the hostility of the big polluters because we will make sure they pay their fair share of the costs of their destruction and create 1 million climate jobs and build the healthy, green economy of the future. That is real change. I accept the fierce opposition of the giant healthcare corporations because we will stop them sucking profits out of our National Health Service. That is real change. I accept the hostility of the privatised utilities companies because we will stop their great rip-off by bringing rail, mail, water and energy into public ownership. And running them for the people. That is real change. And here's a brand new one. I accept the implacable opposition of the private internet providers because we are going to give you the very fastest full fibre broadband for free. That is real change. You can trust us to do all this because we're opposed by the vested interests for standing up for a different kind of society. These policies are fully costed, with no increase in VAT or income tax or national insurance for anyone earning less than £80,000 per year. There's no increases for 95% of taxpayers. We will deliver real change for the many, not the few. That's what this manifesto is all about. And you really can have this plan for real change because you don't need money to buy it. You just need a vote. And your vote can be more powerful than all the wealth in the world. So, the first step is to make sure you're registered to vote. Don't miss out. This is your chance. If you're not registered, do it today. If you are registered, get your friends and families registered too. Because what the powerful fear is that you'll hear what we're offering in this manifesto and vote for yourself and your family. That you'll find out what's actually in this manifesto, not what the billionaire press claim is in it, and vote for your community. That you'll see this manifesto and vote for the person who's struggling, who you do not even know. Vote for the young person who can't go to the youth centre after school because it's closed its doors, and who has nothing to do but hang around on the street. Vote for the mum falling into debt because she has to fork out for her kids to go to university and for her own parents' care. Vote for the older person too afraid to walk down their street because violent crime has doubled under the Conservatives' austerity programme. Vote for the soldier who served in the armed forces for years, now sleeping in a doorway on a freezing cold winter night because the mental health services weren't there when they needed them. How can any government claim it cares about our country when it cares so little about the people who live here? No one can deny the thirst for real change in Britain. I believe that was a driving force behind the EU referendum vote in 2016. But Boris Johnson is trying to hijack Brexit, to sell out our National Health Service and sell out the working people of this country. The Conservatives want to use Brexit to unleash Thatcherism on steroids, to inflict more pain on the very communities so viciously attacked by Margaret Thatcher's government in the 1980s, to benefit the billionaires and the vested interests that they represent. That's why Mr. Johnson is preparing to sell out our National Health Service for a United States trade deal that will drive up the cost of medicines and lead to the runaway privatisation of our health service. 500 million a week of NHS money, enough for 20,000 new nurses, could be handed to big drugs companies as part of a deal now being plotted in secret. If you watched the TV debate on Tuesday night, you'll have seen me hold up the censored, blacked-out reports of secret talks between British and American officials. About opening up our health service to US corporations and driving up the cost of medicines. You'll have seen Mr. Johnson lose his cool because he's been found out. Let's be clear, Labour will never, ever use our National Health Service as a bargaining chip in trade talks. We will never let Donald Trump get his hands on our NHS. Not for sale, not for sale, not for sale. Thank you. As ever, the audience has got ahead of me. I was about to say, let's be clear about it, our NHS is not for sale. If you watch the debate, you'll have heard Boris Johnson claim that he'll get Brexit done over and over and over and over and over again. He might still be saying it for all I know. But you know what? That claim is a fraud on the British people. His sellout deal will be just the beginning of years of drawn-out, bogged-down negotiations and broken promises. 3 years, maybe more, according to the EU chief negotiator, Michel Barnier. And his toxic deal with Donald Trump will take even longer. With Labour, it will be very different. We will get Brexit sorted within 6 months, because we're not going to rip up our main trading relationship. We will secure a sensible deal that protects manufacturing and the Good Friday Agreement, and then put it to a public vote alongside the option of remaining in the EU. So if you want to leave without trashing our economy or selling out our NHS, you'll be able to vote for it. If you want to remain, you'll be able to vote for that. So let's take this out of the hands of politicians and give the British people the final say. It's time to bring our divided country together. And I want to bring our divided country together so that we can get on with the real task of delivering the real change that Britain needs You all know that in your own communities and societies. To drive that change, we will unleash a record investment blitz, getting the economy moving in every corner of our country. There will be no no-go areas for the investment strategy that we have. That's about the jobs at the end of your road. It's about breathing new life into your area, reviving your high street, that wonderful sense of community that there used to be there in every high street all over the country. Our investment blitz will upgrade our national infrastructure in every region of England and every nation of the United Kingdom. And it will rebuild our schools, our hospitals, care homes, and the housing so desperately need. This will be investment on a scale you've never known before, in every town, every city, and every region. And evolved budgets, allowing the Welsh Labour government to build on its success with huge new projects like the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon. And putting an extra 100 billion into Scotland to boost the Scottish economy and secure the future of industry and properly fund our public services. Labour will transform our economy so no one is held back and no community is neglected. And that transformation will be a green transformation. We can no longer deny the climate emergency. We can see it all around us, as the recent floods in Yorkshire and the East Midlands have shown. We have no time to waste. The crisis demands swift action, but it isn't right to load the costs of the climate emergency onto the nurse, the builder, or the energy worker. So a Labour government will ensure the big oil and gas corporations that profit from heating up our planet will shoulder the burden and pay their fair share through a just transition tax. North Sea oil and gas workers have powered this country for decades, often working under extremely dangerous conditions. We won't hang them out to dry. This fund will guarantee a future for their skills and their communities with new careers and secure, well-paid jobs. The scale of climate breakdown is huge. Our response must be on a scale to match it. So, as it says in our manifesto, Labour will create 1 million new green jobs as part of our green industrial revolution. 1 million jobs, from building wind turbines to insulating homes, from reforesting the great countryside of this country to manufacturing new electric vehicles. Margaret Thatcher's government wiped out absolutely huge swathes of British industry. The next Labour government will rebuild it as green industry, the cutting-edge industry of the future. Places whose identity and pride were steeped in the skills of the people who lived there will thrive once more. Because with this manifesto, Labour put the government on your side. If you're a patient or a nurse, Labour is on your side. We will rescue our NHS, make dental checkups free, recruit thousands of nurses and doctors, and bring down waiting lists. If you're a student, Labour is on your side. We will create a national education service make lifelong education a right, value technical education as highly as academic learning, and will bring back maintenance grants. And yes, let's be clear, we will scrap university tuition fees. Thank you. If you are reaching old age, Labour is on your side. You see, we're inclusive. Very inclusive. We'll protect pensions and provide free personal care for those who need it. If you're living with a disability, Labour is on your side. We'll update the Equality Act and Labour will scrap universal credit. If you're a tenant, Labour is on your side, because we'll launch the biggest council house building programme since the 1960s and cap rents. And if you're a new parent, Labour is on your side. We'll guarantee 30 hours of free childcare for all 2 to 4-year-olds. Now, these ideas haven't come out of thin air. They've been developed by people like you working together. Because Labour is a party of experts. I mean, the people who produce the wealth and deliver our services. At the sharp end, carers, teachers, train drivers, engineers, tech workers, all experts in their fields. And today is Carers' Day. Let's think for them for a moment, the huge work they do to care for people which they're not properly rewarded for. They do a fantastic job. They are part of our community and part of our society. That's why when Labour wins, the nurse wins, the student wins, the pensioner wins, the tenant wins, the young couple wins. We all win. This manifesto is, and I'm proud of it, the most radical and ambitious plan to transform our country for decades. In an election offering a once-in-a-generation chance for real change. We can end privatisation and rescue our National Health Service. We can get Brexit sorted and bring our country together. We can tackle the climate emergency that threatens us all. And we can rewrite the rules of our economy to work for the many, not the few. Ignore the wealthy and the powerful who tell you that's not possible. The future is ours to make together. As the great, brilliant Chilean writer Pablo Neruda wrote so beautifully, you can cut all the flowers, but you cannot keep spring from coming. Vote for this manifesto of hope. It's time for real change. Thank you. You're right there. Can I just say this first, before Becky takes questions? 45 years ago today, 21 people were killed and scores injured in a terrible act of violence in this city, the Birmingham pub bombings. It reminds us that the peace in Northern Ireland is priceless and something we should never, ever take for granted.
Thank you, everybody. We've got some time for questions. I'll take them in rounds of 3, and I don't need to tell this well-behaved audience. Let the people that are putting the questions forward the full opportunity to have their questions heard, and please give Jeremy the opportunity to respond in full, and you'll get a gold star at the end of the day.
If you don't get a gold star, you'll get a grim-faced badge.
You'll get my angry face, you don't want that. So, first up, we've got the BBC, Laura Koonsberg.
No, sorry, we don't do that. All journalists will be heard with respect.
Thank you very much, Becky. Thank you very much, Mr. Corbyn. You've said by your own admission this manifesto is even more radical than your last one. It's obviously very popular in this room. But why do you think the whole country wants much, much bigger spending and a much, much bigger state? Because this manifesto has put rocket boosters on what you promised in 2017, and it didn't convince the country to give you a majority then. Thank you.
Thanks. Next up, we've got Sky, Beth Rigby.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Mr. Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, you have a radical plan for Britain, but this election is happening because of Brexit. And on this crucial issue, you were laughed at in the TV debate over your repeated refusal to say what you personally believe. For many voters, someone who wants to be Prime Minister but won't answer whether they back Leave or Remain is perhaps a bit of a joke. Can you give us a straight answer today? Is it Leave or Remain? Thank you.
OK, and then we've got ITV, Robert Peston.
It's all right, it's OK, he's an Arsenal supporter, it's fine.
Let's not get into partisan allegiances. It's been a difficult few weeks, as you know. Mr. Corbyn, you've announced a remarkably ambitious programme of support for old and new industries and a series of nationalisations. Now, much of that will almost certainly be contrary to European Union rules on state aid and competition. So, after the election, is it really possible that the Labour Party would come out in favour of Remain if that means putting at risk your economic and industrial strategy?
No, it's not. It's not. Okay. All right, can I deal with, you want to do three at a time?
Yeah, three.
Okay, I'll deal with those three first of all. Laura, thank you very much for your question. Yes, it is a radical manifesto, but if you travel around this country and you talk to people, radical answers are what's necessary. When you have a when you have a mental health crisis that disfigures the lives of so many, when you have so many people in work having to rely on in-work benefits or in some cases even access food banks in order to survive, when you have so many children in oversized classes, when you have so many children being taught by unqualified teachers, when you have so many people who cannot get a council house, can barely afford the deposit for the private rented sector, and have no hope whatsoever of buying their own home, then you begin to realise the scale of depression there is across the country and that scale of unrequited personal as well as collective ambition that's there. And when you live in a community that once had a proud industrial basis to it, be it a steelworks, a coal mine, a manufacturing plant, many other things like that. And then you walk down the high street now, and what do you see? But roller-blind shutters covered in graffiti as business after business has gone. When you walk past a library that's been closed, a swimming pool that's been closed, a youth centre that's been sold off, and you just see that scale of depression and ignorance of your needs by government and others, I think you begin to recognise the scale of needs all across our society. And yes, it is a radical manifesto, and I'm very proud of that because I do think that we have to change our ways in this country. Because you know what? The levels of poverty are horrific, and poverty is such a waste of the abilities of people. How many children going to an underfunded primary school, living overcrowded accommodation, not doing terribly well in school, doing less well in secondary school, and unable to achieve the ambitions they want for themselves? How many brilliant doctors, engineers, scientists and others are we losing out on because of so many kids growing up in poverty in this country? And so yes, this radical manifesto is about unleashing all that potential for the future. And that's why I'm so proud of the whole investment strategy we put forward on bringing those good quality manufacturing jobs and service jobs as well to all communities across the country. Because the levels of difference between spending by central government in London and the South East compared to the Midlands, the East and West Midlands, North East, North West and Yorkshire is absolutely massive. We cannot go on with this level of inequality across our country. So our National Investment Bank will invest for all regions of the country. And if you say, well, we didn't quite win the last general election, no, I know that every single day. I know that every time I do an advice bureau in my constituency. I know we didn't win because I see the problems getting worse for ordinary people day in, day out and afterwards. And so I am absolutely determined that we will get our message across of the radical change that is necessary to deal with the inequalities within our society. And it is, I believe, about bringing people together. Now, Beth, you asked a question about the EU, and Robert's question was in a similar sort of area. We had a referendum in 2016, and the result was what everybody knows, 52-48. Parliament has spent a lot of time discussing Brexit, and indeed the Shadow Cabinet all around me will confirm that the Shadow Cabinet has spent a great deal of time discussing Brexit. The only cheer I ever got at a Shadow Cabinet meeting was when I said Brexit isn't on the agenda today. But it's obviously an extremely serious issue. My whole strategy has been to try to understand why people voted Remain or why they voted Leave. Because actually, there are people in London, in the South East, who may well have voted Remain, who live difficult lives, bad housing, insecure jobs, and worried about their children's future. They voted Remain. There are people living in other parts of the country in exactly the same conditions who voted Leave. They actually have the same interest at heart, and that is of a government that will actually do something about the injustice and inequality that they face in their lives. And so, I've made it very clear that we will negotiate within 3 months of taking office a credible option of leaving the EU that doesn't tear up every trade agreement and does protect the trade this country has with Europe. After all, roughly 50% of all trade is with the European Union. And so that would obviously be protected in that offer, but it would be an offer to leave the European Union with a trade agreement that doesn't damage all of our public services and our rights at work. And put that alongside Remain in a referendum, and that government, our government, my government, would accept and carry out the result of that. I think it's responsible to try to bring people together. I think it's a responsible and serious approach to it. The tenor of the questions that you gave me is that we've got to carry on forever being divided by the results of 2016. The tenor of what I'm saying is, let's get together on this. The British people will have the final say. Our government will carry it out, whatever the result of that vote is. And the point that Robert made about competition rules and state aid rules, we have obviously looked into these extremely carefully. We have had numerous meetings with the EU over the years on a number of issues. So far as we're concerned, this is all possible, otherwise we would not be putting it forward. And I think we have to recognise that across Europe, there are many communities that face exactly the same issues as left-behind communities in this country do. In northern France, in eastern parts of Germany, in Central Europe, there are people going through exactly the same problems of a post-industrial society where there's not enough investment going in. So, our government will always be one that's arguing for public investment to lever in private investment to improve communities. We will never be arguing for tax giveaways at the top, because all that does is increase the levels of inequality, anger and despair within our society.
Okay, so next up from Channel 4, we've got Gary Gibbon.
Thank you very much. Not all of your manifesto, but some bits of it have really strong echoes of the 1970s. Not everyone here will be old enough to remember state ownership back then and higher state spending and the rest of it. Do you think it actually is misremembered? It gets a bad press. Tell us what you think about the 1970s.
Channel 5, Andy Bell.
Thank you. Andy Bell, 5 News. A lot of people have listened to your plans for more tax, more borrowing, more spending. What do you say to those people who run businesses, ordinary businesses, not big businesses, and maybe the people who are employed in those businesses who say you have lots of ideas on how to spend the money, but no idea how it's created?
And then last in this round, from the Daily Record, Torquil Crichton.
Jeremy, you talk about a green industrial revolution which would be powered by wind farms off the Scottish coast. These wind farms are being built in Indonesia, in Spain, in Belgium and in France. And workers, 1,400 workers who used to work in Fife at the Bifab yard will think that your green industrial revolution is fanciful. And while we're talking about Scotland, the Scottish Labour Party don't want tried and renewed. And the Scottish Labour Party don't want an independence referendum either sooner or later or ever. So is your manifesto a Labour manifesto or a Scottish manifesto?
Okay. first of all, the question from Channel 4. We are proposing public ownership of what are obvious monopolies. Royal Mail is an obvious monopoly. We will bring Royal Mail back into public ownership where it should never have left. We will merge it with the post office to help create a post bank on every high street around the country. And we won't treat Royal Mail delivery workers in the awful way they are at the present time. Talk to your postie next time you see them, and you'll find they are reluctant to even stop walking because they've got a machine that tells the office back home that they've got to carry on walking fast. And they will tell you that a job they once loved, they now hate because of the stress that's on it, and they want to leave. That's not the right way to treat people who are dedicated public servants. And so a company that will pay millions of pounds as a golden hello to a chief executive and then threaten the working conditions of all its workers, I think that company ought to be in public hands and run responsibly for the benefit of the whole community. And so when you say this is a throwback to the 1970s, our public ownership proposals, yes, that also cover water and rail, are about bringing natural monopolies into public ownership. Think of water for a minute. Our water industry is in private hands thanks to what the Tory government did. It is one that's ripped off a lot of the public assets that they had. It relies entirely on an infrastructure that was built through public investment. It is making very large profits for hedge funds and overseas owners and goodness knows who else, and is not terribly well maintained in many parts of the country. Indeed, we fill Loch Ness every year with the waste of water from leaks of our pipes all across this country. I think we can do better than that. And I also think that the rail system, again, is a product of our own investment, and I think we should get the benefits of that and also extend those benefits into a proper bus service all across the country. And so our public ownership model will be one where there is consumer involvement in it, where there is workers' involvement in the running of it, where there is local government involvement in the running of it, where there is a regional voice in all of those companies. So it won't be top-down nationalisation with a board appointed by the government. It will actually be something that's more dynamic, more consumer-orientated and more community-orientated. And I think it's actually a sensible and responsible way to go forward. And then just think for a minute on the way in which our railways have been treated. There's lots of stories told about what British Rail was or wasn't like. There's some people in this audience who can't remember British Rail at all because they're too young. But I can remember it, and I remember the way it was under-resourced by central government. And I now look at the figures and find we're giving more money in subsidies to private rail operators than was ever given to British Rail when it was in public ownership. Andy, thanks for your question, Andy. It's a very good question. Over the past years, since I've become leader of the party, I've spent a lot of time meeting the British Chambers of Commerce, meeting the CBI, and meeting the Federation of Small Businesses and a number of other business organisations. And I spend a lot of time talking to small business owners all around the country. They're actually very hard-working, innovative people who have a very hard time because they have great difficulty in accessing capital to invest to expand their businesses. They have great difficulty over business rates in some parts of the country where they're very high on certain high streets, and they have a hard time in general. So we're absolutely on their side for the innovation and ability of small and medium-sized enterprises to grow the economy. Often the most innovative people, innovative in technical and as well as other terms, are those often in small businesses. And we're absolutely happy and delighted to work with them all across the country because they are part of the motive and engineer for change. What they all tell me is they want broadband, they want buses, they want trains, they want good quality roads, they want access in order to develop their businesses. And so our offer of universal free broadband for the whole country will transform whole areas of the country that have no broadband access, and as a result, no business wants to go there because every business relies on broadband in order just to buy, sell, trade, order and deliver. And so ours are actually the most up-to-date, modern, forward-thinking, most brilliant ideas you will have ever heard anywhere in this election campaign. And thanks for your question from the Daily Record. And what you said about the wind farms off the Scottish coast is absolutely true. Potentially 5% of all of the UK's electricity needs could be met by wind farms off the west coast of Scotland. And Scotland has an incredible tradition on manufacturing and a very, very high skill base in its society. But it hasn't had the investment it needs, and company after company has been put under threat. Scotland needs an industrial strategy, which Scottish Labour are absolutely putting forward. You mentioned BIFAB. I was at a demonstration, a meeting, a rally in support of BIFAB workers in Fife, and BIFAB is a great company, a great opportunity that could make the wind farms that Scotland needs. But the BIFAB workers get a bit annoyed when they see the ships coming from Indonesia, bringing the parts for wind farms that will be eventually erected off the coast of Scotland. These are a strategic need and strategic asset, and I think they should be made in Scotland, made in the rest of the UK. And this green industrial revolution is something that does create great job opportunities. A few weeks ago, I was at Fawley, near Southampton, where there was an oil-fired power station. That's now closed down, is being demolished, and it's been replaced by a final assembly line for wind turbine blades. That, to me, is part of a green industrial revolution, and that's what's going to be repeated all over this country. And in the case of Scotland, we will invest £100 billion in Scotland altogether. It'll be a combination of capital investment and Barnett formula consequentials in Scotland, and it will bring about a transformation in Scotland. It is not absolutely our priority to have yet another Indie referendum in Scotland. That is not our priority. I think our priority is dealing with the levels of poverty and inequality in Scotland. After all, Glasgow has the lowest life expectancy in the UK. The pollution levels are awful in a number of the cities. The housing needs and the poverty needs have to be addressed. And I think they're best addressed by the kind of investment that we will put into Scotland. And just be clear, for the record, we're fighting this election to win as a Labour Party. We are not fighting the election to go into coalition with anybody.
Okay, next we've got the Daily Mirror, Pippa Creer.
Thank you. Jeremy, some voters, white working class men in particular, don't see you as patriotic. Is that fair? And because you've got to take the opportunity to ask questions when you do get them, on social care, the Tories have challenged you to work cross-party, Labour to work cross-party to finally reach a solution on social care. Would you do that? Thank you.
And then next we've got the Times, Francis Elliott.
Hello, Mr. Corbyn. I was wondering whether you agree with the lawyers for Jeffrey Epstein's victims that Prince Andrew should voluntarily give a statement, and whether this incident shouldn't trigger a wider review of the royal household.
And then from The Guardian, Heather Stewart.
Hello. Is this what? Oh, hello, right at the back. Jeremy, voters don't just need to agree with your diagnosis of Britain's social and economic problems. They also need to believe you're the right person to tackle them. With the Tories also now promising a significant increase in public investment, unlike in 2017, how can you persuade the public to trust you to spend their money wisely?
Okay, thanks for those questions. First of all, you asked a question about patriotic. Yes, I do support this country. I am patriotic about this country. I'm patriotic about all the people in this country. That means patriotism is about caring for the entire society, not walking by on the other side for the homeless and the poor. And it also means standing up for values of justice, of human rights and democracy, and taking those values out on the world stage as well. Our government will be one that I want all the people of this country to be proud of. A government that governs fairly for all the people of this country, that does recognise the challenges of inequality and injustice, and around the world become that voice for environmental sustainability and justice around the world. We cannot ignore the fact there are 60 million people around the world who are refugees. We cannot ignore the fact of human rights abuses. Let's be proud. Let's be proud of what we can do. And when I've spoken to members of the armed forces that went to West Africa to deal with the Ebola crisis, or members of the Royal Navy who plucked drowning refugees out of the Mediterranean or others, they told me how proud they were of the work that they've done. I want us to be proud of all of the work we do all around the world as well as in this country. Patriotism is about supporting each other, not attacking somebody else. And I love our literature, our history, and our communities and our society. And those who travel with me know how bored they get when I keep telling them about the local history of every part of the country that we visit. Come on, they can admit it now. Francis, thank you very much for your question. The revelations about Epstein are appalling, and I think we should start from the principle that there are some victims here, desperate young women who were abominably and appallingly treated. They should be first and foremost in our consideration. And the second consideration should be absolutely bluntly and clearly this: nobody is above the law, and anybody who's committed something should be open to questioning and investigation about it. And Heather from The Guardian, thanks for your question. The offers made by the Conservatives on spending ever since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister are sometimes, how shall I put it, I'm trying to be generous here, but if I say, no, it's not, I'm a very generous person, inaccurately sourced. In that he arrived in Parliament the day after he'd become Prime Minister and grandly announced there was going to be 40 new hospitals, which was a surprise, mainly to the people behind him. It then turned out a bit later it was actually 20, and it then turned out a bit later after that, when Parliament was conveniently in recess, it was 6. It then turned out that the 6 were going to get seed funding for something they might do in the future. I'm just saying it wasn't 40, and he did say it was 40. So that seems to me a kind of odd way of announcing your future expansion of our National Health Service. The proposals that have been made in other areas, police and other funding, don't even match up to the cuts that the Tories and the Liberal Democrats put into operation in 2010. And so, yes, our proposals are bold, and I'm proud of that. And yes, the needs are very great all across the country. But we are very serious about how we're going to do this. This grey book here, Funding for Real Change, goes into a great deal of detail about how it will be done. Because I think we've got to level with the people of this country, what the tax implications of what we're doing will be, what the benefits will be, and the benefit we get of a developing, cohesive, happier society as a result of it. If we carry on in the road we're on at the present time, what is going to be the levels of inequality in 5 years or 10 years' time? What is the level of homelessness going to be? What kind of public provision of health, of housing and education will there actually be? No. What we're going to do is invest for the future, for everybody in this country, for every society in this country. I'm proud of this document, I'm proud of our manifesto, and I'm proud to put our message out there in the next 3 weeks, so that on the 12th of December, people have got a very clear choice. With us, you get investment, you get hope, you get opportunities. With the other side, what do you get? A party funded by billionaires that really isn't offering very much at all other than same old, more and more inequality, unachievable ambitions for many people because of the poverty in which they live. Let's turn it round and value everybody.
We've got time for one more final round, and I've got from Birmingham City University, Chloe Tong. Just wait, somebody will come over with a microphone.
I'm Chloe Tong, journalism student here at Birmingham City University. So you said that you're going to scrap tuition fees, but how will your policies benefit students who are currently at university and already have tuition fee debt?
And then final two, I've got Joshua Harris.
As a GMB Union young member and a student about to go into the world of work, what will Labour do to safeguard young workers' rights from day one? And will Labour scrap current discriminatory policy of under 25s being paid less than their colleagues who are over 25?
And Sarah James.
After 9 years of the Conservatives' cuts, schools are currently having to beg for funding for the basics, books, stationery, and some are even having to close early up and down the country, as well as here in Birmingham. As Prime Minister, what will you finally do to give our schools the resources that they need?
Thanks very much. Thanks for your questions. Thanks, Chloe, for your question. Yes, the offer is quite clearly that we will end university tuition fees and return to a grant system to help students get through university. And that is a big offer that we made in 2017, and we absolutely repeat on this occasion. There are people who leave uni with debts of £50,000, £60,000, and that, on top of any other debts that they incur, means they're starting working life with this sort of great millstone around their neck. The reality is that a lot of the debt is never repaid, that the Tories have tried to sell off the debt book at various times and raise the interest rates on it. So we will absolutely not do that. We are looking at ways in which we can stabilise it, which we can bring about some relief for those that have incurred an enormous debt at university, and that is exactly what John McDonnell described on the radio on Monday morning and what he wants to do on this. Because what we've done is loaded a debt onto a whole generation of people that they should never have had loaded on them. Other countries do see education as a right, not a privilege, and I'm absolutely with them on that. And so we will make this, I think, very, very bold and very, very important step. On the question of young workers, thanks very much for your question. First of all, young workers will benefit from a living wage that's payable to all workers, so that as soon as you start work, your minimum income will be £10 per hour. That will be the living wage. And secondly, you will have full rights at work from day one of your employment, not having to go through an extended and often very long probation period in which you'd have very limited or no rights at work at all. And that will also involve the repeal of the Trade Union Act to give rights of trade union representation from the very beginning. And also, you're quite right about the levels of discrimination against young people in society, where their benefit levels are less, their access to housing is less, and so on. So we will end that discrimination against young people, because many of them have great difficulty accessing housing, particularly single young people. And so this is part and parcel of what we're doing on our housing programme as well. And whilst I'm on that subject, just to be very, very clear, in ending universal credit, we will end the two-child policy, which I think is immoral, and with that, the rape clause that's also there within it. And the final question relates to education as well, because I think that we have an over-competitive education system, and we have a disturbing number of students that are sent out of school, sent into pupil referral units, or excluded altogether. And the Select Committee, the House Commons Select Committee, did some studies on this, and the life achievements of those further down the line are often much less and much worse because of the exclusion policy that's in operation. And so our National Education Service will re-empower the local authorities to bring back that family of schools at a local level where they support each other rather than compete against each other, and properly fund our schools so that the teachers have less stress, but also very important jobs like teaching assistants and support staff in the school are actually there to support students that are going through a difficult or a tough time. We underfund our schools at our peril. And so when the Conservatives said they were bringing in a fair funding formula, poor innocent me thought, well, that's a good idea. Yeah, I think there should be fair funding of all our schools. I didn't realise they would actually copied it from 1984 by George Orwell. And it was the very opposite of fair funding. It was actually taking funds out of a large number of schools. Now listen, there's something bad when a head teacher has to go out with a begging bowl to the parents to try and raise money to keep the school going. And if you live in a relatively well-off, wealthy area, and your parents are relatively well-off, they're going to chuck a few quid in and they're going to help the school out. We all want to help our schools out. We all want to support our schools. But if you're living in an area where people are on minimum wage or thereabouts, and they don't have lots of spare cash, or they're doing 2 or 3 jobs to try and keep going, those schools don't get anything. Therefore, those kids lose out. So our fair funding formula will be something very different. It will actually fund all of our schools properly, but it will invest in the after-school activities, the youth centres and the youth clubs as well, because they're a very important part of life. So a statutory provision of youth services will be part of our manifesto, but it's also about the ambition we give our kids in school. I love music, I love poetry, I love art, but I also recognise that kids that do well at music do well at maths, well at science and well at languages. So we will have a ring-fenced pupil arts premium so that every child in every school can learn a musical instrument. Our manifesto is there, it's out, it's open, it's credible, it's deliverable, and it will change the way in which we look at ourselves and look at our country. I'm very proud of it, and I'm determined to get this message out there, to win an election on December the 12th, to bring about those changes in the whole country.